Okay. So the post-lunch food coma is hitting me really hard. So don't know about the rest of you. I'm gonna do my best not to put you to sleep. Um, this is me, Jeremy Stanley. I am currently funded by the Open Infra Foundation, uh, working with a variety of different hats. But what's relevant for today's talk is that I have spent perhaps way too long on OpenStack's vulnerability management team. Um, so uh, the VMT is sort of an informally assembled group that is a subset of the security special interest group within OpenStack. I've got some of our basic goals listed here. We are initial point of contact. We do research. We communicate. We distribute fixes. Um, but something that I should have listed here, because it's the whole point of this talk, is transparency. One of our chief goals is to be as transparent as possible about um, handling of vulnerability reports and advisories for the OpenStack project. Um, Basically, we don't want the community to feel like something is being hidden from them in this process. We don't want there to be any ultimately privileged people or organizations involved in our processes. We want it to be an equal resource for the entire OpenStack community. We feel that secrecy breeds suspicion, and the best way to um, avoid any impression that that we're doing anything against our primary goals is to keep things open and visible to everyone. So, what do we have that helps us along these goals? Um, Basically, OpenStack is continuously developed. It's disruptive for deployments to upgrade between releases. I mean, we try to make upgrades as seamless as possible, but with any upgrade, you're expecting new features, you're expecting potential backwards incompatible changes, um, things that require some upfront planning and preparation. And when you have an emergency security situation, a fix that needs to roll out for that, you don't want the delays inherent in all of that additional planning. So OpenStack has stable branches, and OpenStack's stable branch maintenance process um, helps give us a target that we can backport security fixes to different maintained branches of the development rather than expecting everyone to just always upgrade to the latest version of OpenStack, which would put a lot of deployments at risk for an unnecessary amount of time if we did that. So that stable maintenance process helps us a lot. We've got an established project governance in OpenStack that gives us a fallback path of escalation for major decisions within the project. The ability to switch discussions from private to public in the defect trackers that our projects use is a big win for us, because we can have discussions about vulnerabilities in private if necessary. And then when it comes time to publish advisories, we can switch those defects, the bug reports, where those discussions have occurred, we can switch them to public and point everybody to it. And they can see the entire history of what we went through trying to fix this, possibly spot holes in our thought processes and help us improve. But we don't like a lot of projects that don't have defect trackers with the ability to switch bugs from private to public. They sort of try to keep a shadow copy of their discussion that they can publish when the time comes, but it's frequently missing a lot of detail, and everybody's left wondering, like, well, what really got discussed. So we want to avoid any of that. Um, Also, we use mailing lists, which are as much as people may dislike them in various ways, they are accessible. Just about everybody has or has access to email, can receive messages from mailing lists. We have public archives, which in fair perpetuity provide future access to all of that historical information, announcements, and whatever else that that we send. So those are very useful in our processes. Also, the ability for us to quickly subscribe relevant contributors when we've got an urgent security bug. So the groups of domain experts and security liaisons, having those defined in advance gives us the ability to move quickly in that regard. We don't have to go hunting people down to figure out who should be looped in on a particular bug. Another thing I didn't list here, but has become very important to us, is timelines and embargo limits. We used to just leave bugs private until, if they needed to be kept private for risk reasons, we kept them private until there was a fix available, and however long that took. And in some cases, because part of that process is getting people on the project teams to confirm that the bug is valid at all, if they never got around to doing that, then these bugs might sometimes sit private for years. At one point, I think I found one that was private for somewhere between 7 and 8 years. So we finally decided, like, that's no good, right? We need some sort of forcing function to keep things moving, to make sure that stuff is handled in a timely manner. And so we set a 90-day embargo maximum. So we publish up front that if someone is notifying us in private of a suspected vulnerability in OpenStack, we promise that we will make that report public within 90 days, whether we can come up with a fix with it or not. Because, you know, if it takes longer than that for teams to solve the problem in private, then we probably need help from the broader community to prioritize a solution. In a lot of cases, they're going to be very complex bugs, and they just need a lot more assistance than you can get with a small team focused working in private. So let me see where I am on my time estimates. I'm 2 minutes over, so I'm going to go a little faster through some of these. But the tools that we leverage, we were the first project I'm aware of, but certainly one of the first to publish a detailed vulnerability management process under an open license. And that led to a lot of other projects over the past 13, 14 years, either directly adopting the same process that we published or using it as input to their own. It's gotten reincorporated into a lot of public standards too, like under the Core Infrastructure Initiative, the OSSF, a lot of the discussions that we're having now in the Open Regulatory Compliance Working Group take processes like ours as input into coming up with global standards. So in the interest of time, I will probably also hint that we do a lot of things to make the processes that we follow go faster. We've got a taxonomy we can use to quickly classify things that aren't vulnerabilities effectively. We have one classification for things that are vulnerabilities, and everything else in the taxonomy is a way for us to explain to people why something isn't going to be handled as a vulnerability. We have templated communication, so we can cut and paste boilerplate messages into bug reports, into emails, the impact descriptions that we use for our advisories, those sorts of things. And we use structured data, YAML in our case, to hold all of the fields for our advisory information so that we can auto-generate the actual advisory output for things like announcements and for publishing on our website. So we have, as I mentioned, a public process, which is fairly simple. It's just a few steps. This is in cases where we realized something was actually a security vulnerability after the information is already public. It's not necessarily because someone didn't follow a standard reporting procedure, but more often than not, it's just, people report bugs. They look innocuous at first, but then you start getting down into the weeds trying to fix them, and you realize there's security implications to this bug. But the problem is already at least semi-public at that point, and so we try to find a way to quickly step through getting a fix out, getting this announced, and so it's a quick process. It's fairly easy because it utilizes our typical development workflows, our public code review system, and continuous integration testing upstream, all of that. So the public process is pretty easy. But if we get a vulnerability reported to us in private, we have a few additional tasks that are not as efficient, and the list goes on. And so things that we handle as embargoed vulnerability reports are a lot more work for the vulnerability management team and for the developers who are working on trying to fix the problems quickly. So some of those challenges include the fact that we may have multiple teams impacted, and the bug reports have to be handled by different teams collectively. The limited number of people with visibility into the problem means that we don't have as many possible inputs for identifying the fine details of some of the risks involved, which may be nuanced. We have incomplete testing because it has to be done manually. We can't rely on public code review and public testing. So the private coordination of these fixes is just time consuming. And it leads to additional delays because also we notify a list of stakeholders in advance of upcoming vulnerabilities, and then we have to give them time to actually act on that before we can go ahead with publication. So there are additional delays that just make this generally take longer, in addition to being more work for everyone. So back in 2015, Kurt Seifried was at Red Hat at the time, wrote this excellent blog post, which I will encourage you all to read, but a few select quotes from here. He's basically bemoaning the fact that corporate influence into open source vulnerability handling had led a lot of projects to a default position of just keep everything private, no matter how big or small the risk is. But as a result, they were all burning a lot of additional time handling security vulnerabilities under embargoes when they didn't necessarily need to. Some of them were very low risk and could have probably just run through a public fixing and announcing. But he's basically, and I think it continues to resonate to this day, the idea that one of our responsibilities on the vulnerability management team is to help identify when something is risky enough that we have to continue fixing it under embargo, or the risk is low enough that we can switch to our abbreviated public process and continue things more quickly. And so I guess my recommendations from our experience to date is if you have an open source project that you are trying to handle vulnerabilities for, have clear documentation on how and who to contact in your project, because if reporters can't find that, they may just guess and guess wrong. Have some sort of process that you follow. Our report taxonomy and process is under an open license if you want to reuse it. Make sure you publish advisories somewhere where your users can find them. At a minimum, I would recommend the OSS security mailing list because most distributions pay attention to that. So if your software is being redistributed in a Linux distro, then they'll notice it there. But also, if you've got an announcement list for your project, your users are probably paying attention there. Make sure you announce your advisories. And also always credit people who report vulnerabilities to you, because that encourages them to continue working with you through your process rather than just announcing things publicly themselves. Also cryptographically sign any communications if you can, because that helps establish provenance, and people can know if they're getting real information. Our publication pipeline As I mentioned, we use structured data, which we can review, and then we turn that into restructured text automatically, which can go out in email advisories, and then our CI system turns that into HTML for publication on our security website as well. And that is a link to the OpenStack security website. That is me. This entire talk is under an open license. If you want to reuse any of it, there's also a link there at the end to where I've got a cleaner copy of this deck published. And there's probably a few minutes for questions.
Questions? Oh, 1 second. I'm coming around. Hang on. We do have people hybrid, so they want to hear your question.
Just to make sure that I followed, okay. Can we, is this just a model that we can kind of work alongside, or like kind of model our own methods around, or is this something that we can kind of adopt wholesale as kind of like a procedure within our own project? I guess
you can, if you go to the security.openstack.org website, we've got a link on that site to the process that we follow, and it is fully reusable. I mean, other than maybe changing up some URLs and some contact information, any project could, and a lot of projects have, just directly reuse the process that we do. And I would encourage that if it works for you.
Other questions? So I saw some folks taking photos of the slides. That's a great way to grab the slides. The slides are also attached to all of the different sessions and Sketch. So the PDFs are there, so you can get the URLs that he's been referring you to from Sketch, and the recordings will be available. I'm going on vacation after this, so it might be a couple weeks, but we will have the recordings available. Are there any other questions? Jeremy, thanks so much.